Hello. So, you don't know who I am. My name's Hayzer. Been a coach for Obey for the last 2.5 years. Been involved in the Pro League for a little bit longer than that. Before that was relevant as a player. And this is going to be a little video that I'm making around the Season 6 changes that have been announced by Skillshot for the SPL, and why, in my opinion, it's not a good move for EU players, and why I think EU players are upset about it. Um, so I like to start off by saying this is not a witch hunt against any Skillshot staff or high-res people. I think in general, like, I can see why they're making this move, and like a lot of the staff, particularly Cooper, get a lot of attacks for when moves like this get announced, and like it's not their fault. Um, Obviously, Coop isn't the one making all the decisions. Number one, and number two, like they're not omnipotent. They're not all knowing. They make decisions that they think are going to be good, and not everybody's always going to be right. And this is obviously a matter of opinion. It's there's no definitive right answer on whether this is going to be worth it or whether it's not, whether it's worth it for individual people and whether it's worth it for the league overall. There's no answer to that. We don't know that until it happens. So yeah, just like to preface it with that. And another thing I'd like to preface it with is I've announced that basically I'm not playing. The decision's a lot easier for me to make than other people, quite frankly, because I have I'm a coach, so I have a lower income from Smite. I have a degree in a decent field, so I can go and get a job elsewhere. So it's a lot easier for me to make a decision and to talk about this than it is for others. So yeah. So I'd like to start off by talking about there's two different options supposedly for this Pro League move. You either move to Atlanta or you stay in EU and you fly out for all your games. It's a non-choice really. Choosing to stay in EU is choosing not to continue to compete at the top level, in my opinion. When it comes to like the mental and physical strains of travel, missing practice while you're moving, missing practice in terms of the number of teams you're able to play against, and not living together. I mean, we saw this year how much it affected Splice living together. They came from, way down in the bottom of the league. They're obviously always good players, but living together was definitely a part of the reason that they won the World Championship this year. So it's definitely a big gain living together. You just talk about Smite all the time, which is why teams boot camp before lands and stuff like that. So with all those things combined, I don't think you can compete with the teams that live in and around Alpharetta. Just because even with what was announced, as in you won't play the day after you travel. Like I'm just back from Worlds, obviously from Atlanta. A little bit sick at the moment, so apologies for that. And like I feel awful. I've slept really poorly. My sleeping pattern's a mess. And that would be a reality for you. I mean, they've said that it would be 12 times over the year, February to November, up to 3 times in a month. I just don't think it's tenable. I don't think it's realistic to say that you can be flying that many times and be feeling all right. Number one, and well, I can't sleep on planes. Maybe others can, and they disagree with me. But the general feeling I got from all of the EU players was that, yeah, we hate the flying. Having to do it more times a year would be awful. And I think that, yeah, realistically, you're not going to be the world champion at the end of the year if you choose to stay in EU. That's the first thing I wanted to talk about. After that, I guess I was going to talk about a comparison between Smite and other jobs that's been being made, particularly by, I think it was Todd made the video that was uploaded to Smite Pro. You can check that out if you want some more background information. But yeah, there were things like comparing Smite to being a teacher, comparing Smite to other esports professions like being a CSGO player or an Overwatch player. So first of all, the teaching thing. So teaching is first of all, we're comparing salaries with that of a teacher. Teachers are, I think, the world over considered underpaid. It's one of the jobs that people talk about the most, where people are underpaid. They don't earn enough. Teachers also don't have to uproot their entire lives and move across the world to teach. Teaching, if you go into teaching, you have career prospects. There's chances of moving up the ladder. You're once you're a teacher, they're never not going to need teachers in general. So yeah, it's a career, and I don't think that Smite is a career. I mean, the only really career prospects you have coming from Smite is you can come out of Smite and you can maybe work at Hi-Rez or work at another game studio or go into casting. But at the moment, I don't think that esports is too sustainable over a long period of time. In general, games, I think they're gonna go in and out of fashion. I think Smite will eventually, as much as I love the game, eventually there won't be an esports scene for Smite. And at that point, you've got to consider whether moving your entire life to another country for a year for a salary which you can live off of. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely, and it's cool to be able to live off of a job which you enjoy. But if you're moving and you're earning enough to live, you're not saving, you're not making plans for later in life. Like at the moment, if you live at home and you do Smite full time, even you're not doing anything else, or you can be, some people are studying, and you can also be saving a lot of money, which means that once you finish Smite, like a lot of Smite players have managed to buy houses, well, at least a few managed to buy houses outright with their winnings because they've been living at home and saving up money, so they're mortgage free. So when they finish Smite, they have a bit of money, they can go and get some further education, or they can do a job where they don't earn so much money, and they'll be fine. But players who choose to move to Alpharad to do this for a year, you're just losing a year of career building, which means that when you do go to build a career, if you do, you'll be a year behind your peers at the very least. If it doesn't go on for longer, you'll be a year behind your friends, and that does make it harder to get employed. Number one, because graduate positions in general favor young people, but generally it's just not a nice feeling. You're 24, and your college friends are 20. It's going to be harder for you. Another note is CSGO and Overwatch. I guess the other pro esports, they get paid a lot more. Number one, they're competing for large prize pools, and they are getting higher salaries, I believe. I don't have numbers on that. It just is the way it seems. The other thing with CSGO and Overwatch is they're shooters. So, like, LAN is a much bigger advantage for them in terms of determining which players are the best, in my opinion, because you'd be playing on different pings, and it can be a much bigger deal than in a game like Smite. They're also played in front of a live crowd, which is a reason why those games have to be on LAN. Really, you can't play recorded footage of teams playing to a live crowd. It has to be live, and that's why those games are on LAN, I believe. The other thing is, generally, if you move for work, you're doing it either because you want to, or because you're getting large financial gains or career prospects, or something like that. You're getting something big from moving. And in the case of Smite, it's the same. Realistically, you will have, I think, with the housing stipend, people who rent at the moment will have slightly more money, possibly, but there's a lot of costs that you have to consider with moving, which I'll come on to in a bit. One of those costs could be healthcare. As far as I know, we've not had any information on how healthcare would work. I don't know personally how much it would cost. Maybe something I should have looked up before recording a video about it, but I blame jet lag. So it's a pretty huge deal. If you get sick when you've moved out to Alpharetta, you could just be in big trouble if you don't have healthcare. I don't think that Skillshot would provide healthcare for the players, because we're not employees. We wouldn't be employees of an organization either. And maybe there could be something in contracts where orgs would provide that for you. But either way, it's something that definitely needs cleared up. I'm just gonna have a little drink of tea here. And the other little investments that you'd have on moving, well, not little so much, is, so if you live in Alpharetta, I don't know how much people know about Alpharetta, but you need a car. You cannot, you need a car, you need to Uber everywhere, which isn't ideal, so I think you need a car. So you need to invest in a car, you need to invest in all sorts of different insurances, contents insurance, car insurance, health insurance, presumably. You need to invest in a new phone contract if you're moving from EU. And most of these things are quite long-term investments. Like, normally contracts for these things are going to be a year plus. Maybe you can get slightly more expensive contracts, which are shorter. You can maybe do it month by month, but it's going to cost you a lot. And those things are going to set you back a lot of money. And if you get kicked from a team or you have to leave the league, you've leased a car, you've bought a car, you've got insurance, you've got all these contracts that you've got for a year plus, and you don't have a visa anymore, and you have to leave the country, that's going to be pretty awful. So that's a risk that you're taking. You can imagine that if, you know, an EU player moves in with 4 NA players, for example, they don't get on, the EU player isn't performing, they get kicked. Like, it would suck. It would suck real bad. After a month, you've got, you know, 11 months left on all your contracts. You have to double pay them when you go back home. You no longer have your apartment back home. Maybe you have to move back in with your parents. You have to try and find another job. Maybe play in the SML. You know, it's pretty rough. Another thing I wanted to touch on quickly is just that everybody knows this, and this would happen in any job, but leaving family behind, leaving significant others, leaving all your friends, it does suck. It's a bit rough, but that's the case for a lot of jobs, so I don't think that's the biggest argument. I thought I'd at least touch on it. One of the big pluses that's being touted for this move would be increased production value, I guess, like better production and less buggy Spectator, which you'd hope would happen. So personally, I don't have that much trust in the higher levels of production. I felt like production this year was maybe the worst it's been in a while in terms of player content. The content weeks that players were flown out for seemed to me to be a big waste of money. We saw the video just before the final of Worlds that was played with the players standing in front of the whatever the stadium was called where the finals were played, where DreamHack was, I forget. But standing in front of that, and they said a few words, and Hindu Man talked over it, and overall it wasn't good, in my opinion. I don't know if all of you guys saw that. I don't know if there's a link to that anywhere. If there is, I'll maybe throw it out there, but it wasn't great. Like, the players went out for a media week. We didn't get any of the normal interview stuff we get. I mean, FDOT recorded a few interviews with players, but I don't think there was anything official from the skill shot team, which was really disappointing to me. Yeah, and I also know that players were called to make content during the qualification LAN, like taken out to the studio. Production members didn't show up to record that content. Other people were told to record content, and then like the wires got crossed between the skill shot team and the admins, sorry, and the production staff, and so the content didn't end up getting made. And it was just generally a mess. So that wasn't good. I was generally sloppy. Maybe things would be better. I think it probably would be slightly better, but I don't think it's enough to, you know, motivate the change. And also, Spectator is an issue whether you're online or not. We've seen it already. It's worse online, as I can attest to. Trying to do my job as a coach this year was awful, to be frank, because Spectator has been a mess. We've reported it a lot. And I know it's rough for the devs to try and get it working and try and get it sorted on the limited time that they've got. But yeah, it does generally need to be a higher priority, in my opinion. Like, we saw the Morrigan bugs came through, and Morrigan ended up being banned, permanently banned at Worlds because of Spectator issues, which is pretty disappointing. We had a few games this year not broadcast because of Spectator issues, not recording demos. But the times where the Spectator wasn't recording demos, you also couldn't spectate live. I don't know if it would be different on a LAN client. I don't know the intricacies of the technology on that, but yeah, I think the Spectator issues this year would have been bad regardless of LAN. Yeah, I guess another thing to talk about is the culture difference between the United States and Europe. I think that in the US, you guys have a big thing about, you know, being the best in the world, and we love our country and all that, which is great. And I guess maybe you have the opinion that we'd be happy to move there and that we'd love to move there because it's a better country, blah 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 blah. And the short of it is that European people generally don't believe that. We like where we live, and there's quite a big culture difference between most European countries and Georgia. In my opinion, that's the only place in the States I've really been, is Georgia. So I can't say for other states, but that would be where people would have to live. I would say that there's a much bigger culture gap between the UK and Georgia, and like than like the UK and Germany or Spain or France or Switzerland. I would find it easier to move to one of those countries and adjust than I would to move to Georgia. There's little things like, I don't know, like politics are different. I don't know. The people are just different. That's just the way it is. Which I think is maybe just it's another kind of small thing that has to be accounted for. Is that might be why people don't want to move, because they like where they live, which might be something that people miss. Anyway, I've given this a go. I've never really recorded a video like this, so let's hope it's not terrible. Thanks for listening to me ramble. I appreciate your time. And yeah, if anybody has any questions on this, I'll probably post this in a thread on Twitter. But feel free to contact me via DM, particularly if any high-res people have any questions or anything. Yeah, again, I want to reiterate that please don't start witch hunts over this stuff. Don't be, you know, aggressively contacting high-res stat walls, skill shot staff, whatever you want to say. I get confused with the company names, but yeah. They're not doing this out of malicious intent, you know. They're not going, screw EU, let's mess them over, let's mess these players up. They're really not doing this. This is something that they genuinely believe will be good for the game's health, good for the esports scene's health. So, you know, just try and be respectful. Anyway, thank you very much. I had to mess up now, didn't I? Thank you very much for watching. And yeah, I'll hopefully see you guys again sometime soon if I ever record something like this again. Bye.